The regular season is 1 week closer. It's going to kick off on March 25th, and you can watch all the games on Paramount Plus. And we are doing a team preview for every single team in the Leave a Podcast episode and on YouTube. Check them out. Leave us a review. We want to hear your comments as always. Lisa, I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions as always. We've got two more teams to talk about before this season kicks off.
I've got opinions and I've got thoughts. I'm excited about this. A lot of people in our comments have been picking apart our alphabetical order, saying that OL Rain was an O, not an R. So I'm just putting that out there,
Hey,
guys. We're here. We're doing them all. We're on S and W, San
listen.
Diego, and then we get Washington Spirit. We're doing them all. Don't worry. We're gonna hit your team. We're gonna give you hot takes on
Yeah.
your team, your club that you cheer for. We're gonna talk about the rosters. We will talk about every team. Everyone's like freaking out in the comments. We'll get
Cheers.
there. We'll get there. We still have what 9 days until the season starts. We'll get
Cheers.
them.
Cheers to OL, I guess. You know.
Yeah, like come on, guys, it's the rain. But yes, I'm excited to talk about the Wave because this is a team that I was very high on last year. I loved watching this team. I have similar sentiments this year about this squad and what they can do. There's just something about Casey Stoney that I enjoy the way that she coaches this team and the way that they can kind of get things done. Right there at Snapdragon Stadium this year, there's a lot of good moving parts all around it. What about you, bud? How's it going? I mean, back to back live days, you and me. It's fun to hang out with you.
I stay live. You stay live, we stay live. The thing about A3 is that we're always live. And look, getting another opportunity to hang out with you, chat all things NWSL, hang out with all the awesome A3 listeners is always a great way to kind of kick off my day. So no complaints over here. It's a beautiful sunny day in Chicago, although I don't have a lot of windows around me right now to show that off. But listen, a sunny day in March in high 40s is real like summertime or excuse me springtime kind of energy in the Midwest here, so I'm all for it. So I'm glad the sun's out because we're starting this first segment talking about San Diego, talking about the Wave. Let's start with a little bit of an overview of this team and their off season. Head coach Casey Stoney, second year with the team, and we're gonna have to take a look at the 2022 Coach of the Year and sort of see, what's in front of her and her staff and how they navigated this off season. Because they have a pretty impressive 2022 to look back on. Their inaugural season in the NWSL, a number 3 finish, 10-6-6 for their overall record. Hosted a playoff game, made it all the way to the semifinals. They defeated Chicago 2-1 in their quarterfinal game, but ended up falling to Portland Thorns 2-1 in their semifinal. Made some moves through free agency this
Mhm.
offseason. Navigated the draft pretty well, I think. And, when you and I were chatting a little bit about the offseason specifically, talking about grades, we went with a B for them in this one. So we said good, solid B. Maybe they didn't need this was a team that maybe didn't need to do too much tinkering, but there were some positional areas that they needed to sort of target and tackle. And we kind of felt that they went out and took care of those areas as best that they could have done. So we went with just a sort of a solid B for them overall. But in terms of those moves to try to bulk up a team and really make an even further push in the postseason, they had some pretty significant signings, right? There are certain teams that rang that free agency bell a little bit louder than some others. And I think you and I both agree that San Diego Wave was one of those teams.
Yes, San Diego had, I mean, an okay offseason, a B, right? Especially when we have to take into consideration how they finished last year, and then what those moves indicated in the offseason. And as an expansion side that earned a playoff hosting a playoff game in their first ever playoffs is pretty impressive. I'm going to say coming into the season. So I don't think that this team needed to really change too many things. It's not like they needed an entire shakeup. They needed it just to get a little bit more depth. And they only did that like a little bit because with the changes that they made in the offseason. I think free agency wise, they did really well in what they could do. I mean, some of the free agency comes down to location. And I'm just gonna say it. Who doesn't want to be in sunny San Diego? Who doesn't want to be there in Southern California? So I think that that's a little bit helpful. But they got free agent Danielle Colaprico out of Chicago. That was one of the top prospects in the free agency list. They also got Maggie Doherty Howard. Maggie out of Orlando, a veteran in this league, midfielder. Is perhaps adding a bit more depth to that midfield role and that spot for San Diego and Casey Stoney. But I think that those two signings pretty good for the San Diego squad that didn't really need to shake up too much because they didn't lose too many players in their offseason. They really didn't. They're returning most of the same squad that they had last year. But then during the draft, right, they also got a Sierra Enge, a 13th overall pick. She was the first pick for San Diego that they had, and it came in the first pick in the second round. And she's already signed a contract. And then they get a goalkeeper out of UCLA, a local product, in Laro Brzicki, right, Sandra? We're working on the pronunciation.
Brixie.
Brixie. Sorry about that. Lauren Brixie. So they're adding a lot of depth in that goalkeeper position, which is where they need some depth, right? Like they've got Caitlin Sheridan, who's Canadian international gold medal winner, but it's an international World Cup year. So you're going to need a little bit of depth at that goalkeeper position. But they didn't lose too many players in the offseason.
No, I'm with you. Look, I want to just remind everybody that, of course, you can find all of our episodes on YouTube. If you follow on your favorite podcast streaming service, look it up. We did all season grades. We chatted about this. This isn't, I'm having a little bit of deja vu because I'm just like nodding my head and I'm like, yes, I'm in agreement with everything that you said because I feel like we chatted about it before. But those areas specific, like these players that we're mentioning specifically, whether it's like Danielle Colaprico through free agency or even these draft picks, right? Like Sierra Enge, number 13 overall for them, or Lauren Brixie. Like these are areas where like these are areas that this team is going to need to try to target if they want to build on or have an even more successful 2023. And it's important to note that within a World Cup year, those holes might feel a little bigger in light of certain players who may be absent, right? But it's not just Colaprico. They went out and they really were trying to target some midfield depth. So Maggie Doherty Howard was someone that they went out and targeted. They also signed Rachel Hill as well. And they targeted players that have experience in very specific areas, but like I
Yes.
think somebody like Rachel Hill, I think has sort of shown over the last few seasons in NWSL that she's a bit more versatile. I think that people might have sort of perceived her as previously, like primarily like kind of labeled her as just like a forward. I believe when she was with Orlando was just sort of in the attack as an option for them. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Has put in a lot of shifts as kind of like a wing back. And for I think a coach like Stoney who wants to have versatile tactics, really, I think that's the kind of player that she was also trying to target in this offseason as well. So I think when you're looking at the additions that they made, whether it was through the draft or free agency, and you look at and you compare that to the losses, which were not too big, like there weren't
No.
huge, significant, like detrimental kind of losses. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, we just saw the recent announcement of Carly Southford. She just recently announced her retirement. So right there, it already looks like the addition of goalkeeper depth, it was a good and smart move. And Katie Johnson was one of those players that ultimately exercised her free agency, and now that player is with Angel City, right? But I just thought it was so interesting to hear you chat a little bit about like free agency as a whole for these teams because we're looking at kind of maybe two California teams side by
Yeah.
side. And you're just like the pitch is natural. Like all these teams are going to want to go there. And I think we were looking for a little bit of continuity in that with this next offseason because we saw during that expansion year how many players wanted to get out to California and have those negotiations, mutual conversations about moving a player to a California team. But we've got an Angel City that we didn't exactly give a high mark in free agency because they
No.
might have took some big swings, but they kind of missed out and didn't land too many. They did get Katie Johnson, but you're talking about towards the end of a preseason and towards the end of a free agency where that list is much narrow. But then you've got San Diego Wave, who really made that splash really
Yeah.
early on with the announcement of Colaprico and then Hill and so on and so forth. So I think that's why we're kind of rolling with the offseason grade of a B with them. I think they navigated it well. They didn't go too crazy, and I think they made a lot more smart moves. But
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I agree. I think that, and we'll get into the roster for the
yeah,
San Diego side, but getting someone like a Danielle Colaprico is a player that's going to make an immediate impact on this roster. I think we're going to see her week one get starts in the midfield, be that defensive lockdown player that Casey Stoney can really lean on, and there's still a lot of good depth in that midfield position, and I think Maggie Doherty Howard adds more to that depth. Even Rachel Hill, like you talked about her versatility, she could play in that midfield. But I think Colaprico is the biggest roster signing for San Diego because I think she'll make an immediate impact starting games in the first week, match day one.